So I know a lot of people in assessment right now are thinking hard about how AI impacts their assessment strategies. And I certainly have done the same. And this is kind of a product of some things that I have done myself. But I've been thinking about this for a very long time. I think a lot of the things that we're encountering with AI are things that have been with us for um, 20 plus years or more. I mean, because I think in large part we've ignored the impact of, say, Google alone on how people collect and use information. Well, AI is making that almost impossible to ignore now because, well, it depends on how you use it, but Google on steroids is the way a lot of people try to use it. And I want to show you some different things you can do with it that are is a lot more targeted, that you can customize and build in a different way as a result. And this is not just about assessing for AI, but also about how to build your course or rebuild your materials with AI. So we're going to do a little bit of AI usage as well as talking about some of the ways in which it impacts what you should be assessing. Okay. All right. So, and I know the presentation is officially titled "The End of Academic Dishonesty," and that's certainly a part of it. But I want to turn that around a little bit in the sense that I feel like that's kind of a negative theme in terms of an academic. It's certainly there's a part of that in this thing, but academic dishonesty, I think, is something that we definitely need to confront. And I'm going to talk about how AI changes the definition of that or how we should be treating that. Okay. All right. So that's enough of a prologue. Real quick introductions. My name is Tom Hames. I have been teaching at a community college environment since, well, I started teaching the week before at a community college. That is, I taught in grad school too, but the week before 9/11, which was fun for a government professor. I teach government, U.S. and Texas government, and unfortunately, that's all they'll let me teach, even though my areas of expertise are what I actually technically did in grad school was international relations, but I've become pretty practiced on the other. Essentially, I have been in post grad school for the last 25 years. I'm also a technologist. I have been using computers since the 1980s. I used to work for Apple and Motorola, but I'm not a technology. Um, I'm not, I wouldn't consider myself a technology accelerationist. I've always approached technology different from a lot of my technology colleagues because I don't like to talk about technology. I like to talk about what can I do and how's that technology going to affect what we're talking, what we're doing, both as a in working as well as teaching and what we're teaching. And that's always been the case. I mean, I've built learning spaces that emphasize, okay, how can I use this room to most effectively teach? I've built online learning spaces, so this is not a new thing. I do think AI is the most significant change in how we interact with computers since the PC revolution. I mean, the PC revolution uh, gave everybody access to computing, whereas before, very few people had that. And so that was huge because we put that those tools into a lot of people's hands, and we saw the explosion of creativity and things that happen as a result. The AI is doing the same thing with well, I call it software information, et cetera, et cetera. We have information tools like no one has even, well, I would say they haven't dreamt of it. Anybody who's watched Star Trek knows how the computer works there. So, all right, that's enough prologue. Again, questions at the end, but also as we go through, please don't hesitate to stop. So, um, I recently read, and I also saw an interview with Imad Mostak, who's one of the people behind the AI platform Stable Diffusion. He's got a new website, or relatively new website called II.Inc. And but he talks about something called the intelligence inversion. Um, and he has some very salient points. And this is not future. This is present. It's just that the system hasn't caught up yet. But the reality is that the value of cognitive work as we understand it is rapidly approaching zero. Most people in an office do not do what I would call creative work. They do not do exploration. They are part of a machine that's processing pieces of paper at some level. I've worked in offices, I've worked in the corporate side, and that's certainly a lot of what you end up doing. Um, the number of creative problem solvers in that environment is relatively small, and those people are probably okay. They're adaptable, but the vast majority of what I'll call industrial office workers uh, is vulnerable to AI shifting the goalposts. So we have to bear that in mind as we're both as we're looking at our own jobs, but also as we're looking at and how we do our own jobs, but also as we look at what kind of jobs we're preparing our students for. So I recommend taking a look at his book, The Last Economy. It's available for free. You can download it, and it's an interesting read for sure. Um, and so, what does that mean for teachers and where are we threatened? Well, if you teach like a machine, you can be replaced. If you believe teaching is an emotional connection with your students, that you're helping them through the process, that's a lot harder to replace. The human factor is going to matter. Okay. And so we have to be teaching the human factor as well. So this is how things get inverted. I mean, if you look at the way work operates in today's world, uh, still in many cases, um, you're still seeing people writing code. They have to worry about writing well, syntax, grammar, things like that. They're producing products to a certain degree, even if it's just memos and whatever. They're becoming they're experts in certain fields. They know, which filing cabinet to look for things in. They know how to follow instructions because it's important that everybody's on the same page and walking down the same road. Um, there's a lot of as a writer, artificial difficulty, plagiarism. These things matter very little. And then yeah, the oracle treating the textbook as a source of truth and grading as we understand it doesn't make sense in this environment. In the AI driven world on the right side here, these are the skills that our students are going to need going forward. They need to be able to provide their own direction. So if it's just about following directions, again, there needs to be some coordination and stuff like that. But again, you can help. I mean, the AI can help with that as well. So you can't trust all the information in the world. And AI gives us some powerful tools for verification. I mean, I teach information literacy. That's the first thing I teach in my classes. And one of the things I have the students do is use Mike Caulfield's the SIFT method and break down sources. And this was designed for social media, but it also works perfectly well with chatbot responses, which is you stop, don't just take it for granted that whatever you're seeing or get from the AI is correct. That you investigate where that information is coming from, that you find other sources that either agree or disagree. And then you trace things back as much as possible to the original source. So if there's a quote from an interview, try to find the interview or the video or whatever the interview, or if there's data, see if you can find the original data that they're pulling off of, or et cetera, et cetera. So AI is really good at helping people map this, even lazy people like my students. Uh, and I definitely point that out as, this is a good way to use AI. Find your way down the road that much faster. Agency. Students have to, learn how to become independent agents, and so your curriculum and your assessment should be based on that. Um, the cognitive load. I'm not going to go through all of these, but uh, thinking through what the implications are of whatever they're doing. When that says what is ethical. Looking for hallucinations. That's part and parcel of verification. Of course, humans provide for hallucinations too. If you hadn't been reading social media recently, if you've been reading social media recently, you understand that, right? The naive intern, giving that's a part of the agency. And the important thing here is also, this is something from formative assessment from and this is really cool because I've been able to incorporate this into my classes, is this idea that you either know it well enough, you have a certain expertise, and versus you kind of have a C-level understanding of things. AI has a C-level understanding of things. And that's the biggest, when I first started looking at ChatGPT a few years ago, I said, oh, this writing's pretty crappy. And then it took about a week for me to think about, wait a minute, my students' writing is pretty crappy. How am I going to tell the difference? So, and of course, the writing's gotten better. So this people have to operate at a higher level than we're used to. AI can help you do that, and that's the whole point. Just like every other tool. I mean, a car gets you there faster than your feet do. That's a tool for transportation. AI is a tool for the mind if you use it right. Um, so, in terms of the assessment, so we've got to get past this idea of the answer. I think we're all really used to assessing for the answer. I mean, the vast majority of assessment is for the answer. In some ways, this has been out of date since Google. Although I will say Google has gotten so bad lately, finding an actual answer at Google is a bit of a challenge. I think these days I'm probably using a chatbot 95% of the time, and Google maybe 5%. It depends on what I'm looking for. Um, and so you know, academic dishonesty is often based on stealing the answers. You can't steal process. And so if you can figure out how to assess for process, the integrity problem largely goes away. The question is, what does integrity means? What are they cheating? And they're cheating the system. And the reason they're cheating the system is it's become largely meaningless to them. It's just a stupid game that they've been taught they have to get through this maze. They have to get their little piece of paper that says they're graduates. And everything else along the way is just a distraction from that goal. My students don't ask me, what can I learn in this class? They ask me, how do I get an A in this class? Or more depressingly, how do I get a C in this class? How do I pass it? And that's been a thing for a long time now. And it's a result of the fact that they're just widgets in a machine. That's what we are too. We are also a factory. We're a factory of students. Unfortunately, so much of our day-to-day existence is all about pushing them down the assembly line of the widgets. We've kind of lost sight in many cases of what teaching actually means and what it should mean and that human connection. AI is a rude awakening for that. So, and so when we're defending academic integrity, we're usually defending grading, not actual learning. And and AI is really easy at making. AI is really good at making answers, even from scratch. I mean, you could find them on Google. Well, you don't even have to do that now. Okay, so I have done a couple. I've built a couple documents. Well, not a document. One, I use a tool called Notebook LM. If you haven't used it, I highly recommend it. It's a Google tool. What it is what's called a retrieval augmented generator. It's an AI, but it only searches things that you put into it. And so I recently rebuilt my entire course would partner with AI. I did about 600 pages worth of queries on it, and I have a library of sources of people who I've read over the years, who I know, and I'm like, man, I'd really like to get this into my class, but I can't figure out how. And using the AI, was able to blend this stuff together and actually pull it in a way that I've never been able to do before. And it helped me work my way through that. And of course, I'm always the last reference on that. But I'm always looking at these things. But the amount of things that I could do with the course it was amazing. So the problem with my database is that a lot of it's copyrighted. And so therefore, I'm the only one who can use it. I mean, I own all these books, and so it's not a copyright violation if I put them up there to use them myself in a tool. It's like having a bookshelf, but it's a bookshelf that I can search, uh, seamlessly, and I can ask complicated questions to it. I can ask to compare this book and that book, or what's the point here and what's the book point there. So I built an OER version of that. It's a little less comprehensive than the one I've used. One thing I will encourage you to do if you like this method is start building your own libraries in Notebook LM and use them as your partner and your tool as you're trying to solve the kinds of problems you have. And I have different libraries. I have one for pedagogy, assessment specifically, AI, constructivism. I mean, systems thinking. It just depends on the subject that I'm trying to analyze. So I even have notebook LMs that have game rules in them, which is actually quite useful because you've been playing a game and you're like, what do I do here? What did we do wrong here? And you can just search it, and there it is. It says, it tells you on page 35. It says this is what happens when you get into this fix. So if you play complex games at all, like I do, it's quite handy. All right, so this QR code will lead you there, or you can just type in bit.ly OER pedagogy, and it'll. That's the other way to get there. This is going to be open. You can come back and use this anytime you like. And I don't have any plans to take it down unless Google gets rid of Notebook LM or something. But we're going to play in this sandbox a little bit. Okay. So first activity. What I want you to do is to go into that. And remember, I said at the beginning, see if you have an assessment on your computer somewhere. You don't have to, find something that you would like to work better, or that you want to make it into a formative assessment as opposed to a summative assessment, or if you want to make it more gamified, or any number of other things like that. Um, Throw that assessment in there and then ask it the question, I have an assess this is my assessment. I never get the results I'm looking for. How could I change this assignment to better support students in an environment of plentiful AI? This is also on the Google Doc, which is down here at the bottom. That's what this QR code is, bit.ly coaches working doc, and that will take you to our shared Google Doc. So those questions should be there as well. So if you don't have to take a screenshot, you can just copy and paste it out of the Google Doc. And that's the one I need to pull up, actually. Hang on a moment. Come on, Chrome. Where's my Chrome? All right, fine. I'll do it in Safari. The other thing the Google Doc has, if you scroll down to the bottom, is a bibliography of everything that's in the OER repository, but also everything that's in the repository that I have that I've been using. So if you're looking for any particular titles and stuff like that, if you have any suggestions of something I've missed and you think would be good, please, I'm all ears all the time. I'm always in favor of good ideas. So, um, so if you could just, put your name, put your first name or whatever, just so that I know whose is which. And then, so the first question again is I have an assessment that never gets the results I'm looking for. Give it the assessment. How could I change this assessment around so that it works better with AI? And then, the last economy is also in this library. So you can actually search, how does this assessment prepare students for the world described in the last economy? And you could do this with any book about, the future of AI or whatever. So just copy and paste in there once you get some results. Yes, I can add a link to chart. Sorry, I meant to do that anyway. Do. Okay, here's the pedagogy link and the Google Doc link. Sorry about that. I meant to do it. I got off talking on something. Talking and thinking are not the same thing, believe it or not. Yes, I know. Yeah, exactly. It's not that time consuming to build it. The hardest thing about the OER one, that actually took me in some ways longer to build than the one I have, is finding equivalents that are openly available. And unfortunately, AI it's a complete rabbit hole, but AI and copyright, we're gonna have to rethink that. So, but it's going to break a lot of things in the economy. So we don't have time to do all of that in 1 hour. We don't have time to do what I've got, what I'm trying to do. All right, I'm going to come back to this. Please, feel free. And as I say, just cut and paste the answers to your questions in the boxes on the chart. The only reason I use the chart is just to sort of keep things from getting too messy. Um, and you'll have access to this doc as well. I'm not going to shut this down. Um, I do ask, please don't destroy other people's work, but other than that, have at it. Okay. So we'll swing back around on this. There's three activities, by the way. Okay, so let me walk you through the things that I worked on when I was designing my course. And this includes the assessments and includes the entirety of the course. But assessments are critical to the flow of the course. And so you can't divorce them. They have to be integral to what you're doing. Okay. So um, there are four main things that I really wanted to make sure I got into my course. Uh, Chihins Mahali, if I can say that right, he has the worst name in the world. His flow principles, actually, it's not the worst name, but he is Hungarian, um, which is a language unlike any of the ones that I actually speak. Uh, Chinese fits into that category too. Um, but flow is flow principles, and then formative assessment. I'm going to go through these one by one. Gamification and constructionism. And each one of these, I want all four of these to be in there. So that's one of the things that I was able to do with this library is to sort of do a mashup in a way that kept the logic of all of them going. So, flow, enjoyment appears at the boundary between boredom and anxiety when the challenges are just balanced and within the person's capacity to act. This is also similar to um, Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. You gotta push the students, and I think with AI again, you can push them a lot further than you could if a lot of the logistics. Think about all the logistics that you go through in your class just to get that basic assignment out there and doing stuff, etc. My classes have become very active learning as a result. The other nice thing that's kind of cool is that I can actually have the night before, if I see my classes are struggling with stuff and I want to, do an activity, I can literally create that activity with an AI and simply I'll do, okay, here's my problem, build that, and then I'll take it into that pedagogy library and I'll say, is this maintain the principles of what I'm trying to do? And then of course I look at it and go, okay, I need to tweak this a little bit and tweak this a little bit. But the point is that usually active learning stuff takes me weeks to build, and I can build it in a couple of hours. I even built a website to simulate getting a bill through Congress in an evening using AI and vibe coding. So formative assessment. Uh, so, key thing with formative assessment is assessment is part of the learning process in the way that it's not about comparing students to other students. It's the students are in a race with themselves. And most importantly, you have to be able to, I mean, feedback is the most important part of this process. It's about helping them master the steps that gets them forward. And of course, everybody goes up that stairway at a different pace, and you have to build the course accordingly. And some students are going to charge ahead on their own, and other students are going to have trouble on the first step. And that's where the teaching part comes in. Dylan William is a good source, embedded formative assessment. That's the one I tend to use on this subject. Gamification. As I said earlier, I'm a bit of a gamer. I enjoy playing games, and actually, when I've been able to get good games going in my classes, they enjoy it a lot too. As I said the other day, I created a simulation, a web simulation that gets them through that simulates getting a bill through Congress and all the different steps and ways in which it can get killed. I also have one for the Texas legislature, and I break my students up into groups and I say, okay, go to this website and figure out, which chips you're going to play in order to get your bill through. And the first group to get a bill through the legislature wins. And so it's really hard to win though, and it's actually reflective of a real percentage chance that bills have to pass. And so, that and again, I created this in an evening. So, but gamification is, it's not about external rewards. It's really about motivation and keeping people focused on what that learning task is, so it doesn't feel like it's rote. You learn by doing, and a game is always going to do rather than talk. Especially if you design it right. So gamification, and then last but not least, constructionism. Uh, of course, Seymour Popper is the progenitor of this, but he and Edith Harrell did a book in the early 90s. And by the way, all of this stuff is not new. All of this, every single thing I'm using here is pre-AI. There's nothing here that's specifically around AI. Okay. This is good teaching. This is what we understand about how people teach, how people learn, and how to structure courses to maximize student engagement and learning. So the other thing I think is extremely important is to give the students a stake in the game. Now, I said earlier, it's not about the product, it's not about the answer, it's about the process. Well, you build the process around building the product, and you assess mainly on the process. And the product is something not for me, but for them. So, for instance, in my class, all my students build a publicly accessible website that's theirs. And as I point out to them, nobody's going to give a crap what grades you made in your, freshman, sophomore government class. However, if you can show them you can communicate complex topics, by actually showing them what you've built, then that's a huge win. Employers are going to love that. So, and it's a demonstration of capability, and that's really what every class should do that at some level. The final is not a product. Okay. Um, so, okay. So that's what constructionism is about, and is, as they say in their book, mastered concepts and gained a much deeper understanding uh, than they would in the pro in the construction of the product itself. Okay. And again, AI is great at creating product. I could literally go out and have it build a website for me. As a matter of fact, I have either complex ones with coding or simple ones where there's automated website builders out there. But my students aren't in there. So the process is about bringing the students in there. So this is kind of how my class works. Well, that's not kind of, but this is how my class works. And I've genericized this a little bit. Um, and again, this is based on all of these concepts. First of all, the meta logic comes both from gamification as well as formative assessment. There's no F in the sense that, I mean, there's an F if you don't fix things, but as long as you're in the redo period, you can keep redoing that assignment until you get up to at least the bronze level or the silver level. Students really need to get to, and these percentages are not the percentage of the grade. This is the expectation level of, this is where this falls. So a bronze level is about sea level work. And as Jose Antonio Bowen and Edward Watson, um, by the way, recommend this book, uh, Teaching with AI. I'll put a link in the chat to it. Um, okay, so the bronze level, as again, Bowen and Watson say, the bronze level uh, is something the AI can actually do itself. But I have a gateway quiz. It's worth some points, but it's not a lot. The most of the points are in the silver level, which is kind of the minimum necessary to go on in the class. So things like setting up the website initially and building a couple of pages is a silver level activity, and then starting to add specific content around those pages. Um, and then are silver level activities. Gold is taking up another level, and that you see the larger picture and you understand the context of what you're talking about. And then platinum is, can you help your peers out? Because the best way to learn and the hardest thing to do is to teach. So if you can get your students to teach each other, those that can do that are working at a very high level. and so they should get credit for it. So usually that's a write a review of somebody else's site kind of thing, or give people feedback or help people out in some way. Every module has a little different medal, what the medals actually mean, but that's the basic idea. Again, bronze is kind of the gatekeeper. You got to get at least to that level to unlock the module. Silver is how you get to the next module. And then gold and platinum is, well, if you want to do the stretch goals, go for it. You know, and it's amazing. And most of my students are doing the stretch goals at this point. Um, so, and it's going to come up with an interesting grade distribution. I think I'm going to get mainly A's and B's and then F's. So, not many C's, if any at all. So I've already worn my chair. The way I do it in mine, again, they're building what my students do is again, they're trying to, I try to personalize this as much as possible. So they pick a societal challenge like homelessness or healthcare or something. And I ask them to pick something that's specific to through their lives. And then they have to research that challenge. So to do that, you need some information literacy. So again, I use the SIFT method for that. Then you have to define how that problem works. And this is a universal thing. Anytime you're trying to fix something, whatever that may be, you're going to have to go through these steps, whether you're fixing society or whether you're fixing a broken company or whether you're fixing your car. You still have to go through these steps, and teaching people how to go through these steps in a deliberate manner. And this is what I'm assessing on. Can you go through these steps? Problem definition, then how do you actually execute what you're doing? So in the case of my classes, come up with a strategy for getting this through the Texas political system or the American political system, depending on the class. And they have to analyze how to get a bill through Congress and what kind of things influence Congress, like interest groups and stuff like that. They have to be able to understand those and use them as tools to execute that part. And then last but not least, putting it all together and communicating it clearly and effectively on their website. So, um, yeah. So building this again took me about 24 hours. It checks all the boxes. And I started with the course that I had, and I said, this is the problem solving uh, approach I want to take to my class. Now, fold in flow, fold in formative assessment, fold in gamification, fold in constructionism. I've already got constructionism because, again, I've always been very big on tangible work product. And gradually over time, with a lot of queries, I put that together. I had to drive the car to get there, but it definitely got me a lot faster than trying to figure it out myself. Okay, so AI is going to force us to assess the human premium. This is something that, again, the last economy talks about, and also the Bowen and Watson book. The uh, And so we have to figure out where the human is in the loop. And a lot of people are worried about the human not being in the loop. I have less concerns about that, but the human's going to have to adapt, just like we had to adapt to industrialization. Now we have to adapt to post-industrialization. And I think a lot of the issues we're having right now is because we're in the midst of a paradigm shift. And if you read Thomas Kuhn and systems theory, and I've got a notebook for that as well. Um, you recognize how difficult that period is because you know what how the old system worked, and it's broken, but you don't know how the new system is gonna work because we're still figuring that out. It's an iterative process. The example that Kuhn uses is looks at he's a historian of science, so he's looking at the evolution from Copernicus and the idea that the earth revolves around the sun to Newton, who finally explained how that actually works. And that was 125 years. And during that period, people came up with all sorts of crazy ideas to explain it. And of course, they also had to deal with things like the church locking them up because Earth-centric models kind of jive with the Bible a little better, at least the interpretation they had at the time. And so, that's why Galileo got into all sorts of fun trouble with the Catholic Church, et cetera. So, but this is a process, and the problem is you can't really argue about what the new thing is yet because you don't know what it is, right? So the one thing I do know is that the human is going to be in the equation. And how that works out though is I'm not really sure because we provide that push. I mean, at the end of the day, large language models are just spitting out what humans put into them because they're sucking up data from all sorts of places. Or in the case of the notebook I am, the difference there is that I know the humans who are spitting those out. I've vetted them and I say, okay, these guys know what they're talking about, so therefore I can use them. It's just like going to a class. It's just like building a syllabus. So that's kind of the job we've been doing as teachers for a long time. But now I can automate that in a way that wasn't possible before. Okay, so here's another question, and again, there's another chart a little further down the Google Doc, um, and suggest human premiums. How can I make this more human? And I think this is also something that makes it more anti-fragile when it comes to AI, because the one thing that AI cannot simulate is the life experiences of your students. And if you can get them to bring that to the table, and it's first of all, it's going to make things much more meaningful to them. But secondly, you know, unless they invent a fictional version of themselves, which what's the point, right? I think a lot of times when you do that, it really causes the students to engage on a much higher level. And I've been doing that in a way for a long time, not just with AI, but AI makes it that much more powerful. And then how does this assignment prepare my students for employment in an AI society? So same deal. Go to the pedagogy thing, search those questions again. Those are on the Google Doc. You can just cut and paste that, and then drop your answers in that. And so at the end, we'll kind of go back and look at things. Yes, judge a man by his questions, not his answers. That's another important thing. I'm teaching questioning, not answering. And last but not least, structuring the feedback loop. Again, for formative assessment, which is central to what I'm trying to accomplish, um, the giving, how do you give feedback and how do you give feedback on particular assignments? Again, you can use these to give you suggestions and say, okay, if you phrase it this way, it doesn't look like you're an idiot, you're wrong, whatever, however the students are likely to interpret it. I'm not college material, whatever, I've heard it all from the students. I never say that to them, trust me. But that's a win because if you get them to ask those kind of questions of themselves and see that they can do it, they can take those first steps of climbing the mountain of being a well-rounded person, which is what we should be building in college. It's not a job training program. People who are well-rounded and good thinkers are going to be fine in this transition. People who are rule followers and simply are mechanistic, they're the ones whose jobs are going to get wiped out by AI. So, Carl, did you have a point or did you? I see you unmuted. Oh, I'm not doing a good job of keeping up. Thank you for resharing those. All right. Yeah, and Notebook LM is actually evolving all the time, and it's evolving in a good way. The cool thing about Notebook LM is the person who's behind, one of the key people that is behind it is Stephen Johnson, and he's not a computer person, he's an author, and he's building Notebook LM along with a Google team to incorporate the kind of things that come out of his books. And I've been using his books for a very long time. Where Good Ideas Come From is an incredibly good book about how people innovate and learn. So and so they're building it very much with that kind of call it a liberal arts mindset, but this idea that you can construct things out of it. So it's gotten better in that regard. Okay, this is kind of a long slide. I don't usually like to have this much text on a slide, but I wanted to at least instill a certain level of urgency in this because a lot of people are like, well, how much time do we have? How much time do we have to change? Well, as Imad Mostak says, the technology, everything I've described is something that is today. It's not any future AI. The limiting factor, the slowing factor is our systems and how we're adapting to it. And we can keep ignoring that, but those institutions and or people who pivot and charge forward are going to be much safer and in a much better place. So, you know, what we're going through right now, again, the prop and disillusionment, um, this is something where people lose faith in education because it's teaching them things that they don't need to know in an AI world where they can easily look up. And um, for a while, there's some people who will be very effective at gaming that. There are others who will say, "What's the point? What am I paying for here?" There's any number of responses to that, but all of those things are going to really pressure institutions to instill changes. Fighting AI with rules of you can't use it, you can't, first of all, trying to fence it in, so to speak. First of all, you're doing a disservice to your students if you do that, because that's the nature of the world today. Again, I was in a session yesterday with Jose Antonio Bowen, Future Tense Forum, my friend Brian runs, and he said something that really hit me. And he said the first question, he works a lot with corporations as well. He says the first question everybody's asking on interviews, he says, how do you use AI to speed up or enhance your work process? And if you can't answer that question, you're not going to get the job. And this is for fresh outs, people coming out of college with a degree. And if they can't do that, then they're at a huge disadvantage. And so, and if you teach them how to use it properly, and it's can be an incredibly powerful tool. If they use it to replace themselves, well, that makes them replaceable. Same thing's true with us. Okay, we have to get the adversarial learning, the rise. So the idea, um, yeah, I'm actually on a hiring committee, and uh, I was asked, how do I do an AI question? I said we should do some version of that. Um, so so the idea that you want to work with AI as a partner, that you use it as an adversary. The nice thing about AI is you can bounce ideas off of it. It never gets tired. It never thinks you're stupid for asking the same question three times. A lot of times there was stuff in that flow of creating the course that I dealt with before, but I needed to remember how to do it again. So I asked it again and it doesn't care, right? You could also call it a jerk and you can ignore it. You don't have to be nice to it like you do a human being. It doesn't care. It has no feelings, right? And the last thing is, what we're going to evolve into, and this is not that far off. Instead of a certification of knowledge, it should be a certification of agency. Do you know how to operate in a rapidly changing and dynamic environment? And that's what a university degree should have always been. But as we well know from studies of, say, critical thinking alone, it's not exactly what we produce. So, real quick, taking this back, and as I say, a lot of the stuff I use is way much predates the AI age as we think of it today. AI has been around since the 50s, but that's a whole other different conversation. I think people get too obsessed with the technology instead of worrying about what you need to do and then building the technology around what you need to do. And if if you haven't read Douglas Engelbart's Augmenting Human Intellect, it's an amazing document. It launched the computer revolution, and no one has ever heard of him. They think if you've heard of him, you think he's because he invented the mouse. Well, he invented the mouse to make the computer accessible to humans, in part. That was part of what he did. And I like to call it augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. The brand of artificial intelligence, I think, has been often sullied. We think of HAL or something like that when we think of artificial intelligence. The movies love to play with that idea. But I don't think what we're dealing with here is artificial intelligence. I think it's augmented intelligence. Um, and we need to think of it as a symbiotic relationship. Again, going back to the 1960s, J.C.R. Licklider, man-computer symbiosis. He argued at that point, said a lot of things that I don't do because they're too much clerical stuff that I have to get off my to be able to do them. And the AI takes a lot of that clerical stuff off my plate. Figuring out how assessments work. I can have it generate fresh quiz banks on the fly. I have all of my textbooks in an OER um, database for my students to use. And I can literally go in there and say, give me a new quiz bank this semester. And I don't have to rely on the publisher to do that. And it could, I'll skim it through and make sure it's not wrong. But for the most part, it's very accurate. And that saves me a huge amount of time, you know, and I can concentrate on the things that really matter, which is teaching. Yeah, find the things you don't want to do and give those to the AI. Exactly. I'm a little cautious about taking it all the way to grading because, again, if grading is an automated process, that's a problem. And that's a problem because it's an automated process, not because of the fact that it's giving you a real sense of what the students know or don't know. Okay. And so that's a slightly longer and different conversation. Okay, so let's go back and look real quick. Anybody got any questions? Feel free to jump in at any point. Um, but let me jump back to the Google document here and see what people came up with. Let's personalize this a little bit. Um, yeah, okay. So these are good, And again, you don't have to do what the AI says. It's not an oracle. It's a partner. It's a grad student, it's an intern. Sometimes I like to call it my dumb Uncle Al because of sometimes the answers it gives. And you have to recognize how AI works, how transformer technology works. It is basically vacuuming up whatever you give it and then connecting it up in the way it thinks it makes sense. And so one of the reasons, for instance, that you can tell if something was written by AI in many cases is that it uses a lot of M dashes. Why does it use a lot of M dashes? Well, for about 10 or 15 years, there are a ton of journalists who decided M dashes were the way, don't use semicolons, use an M dash, it looks better. And nobody knows what a semicolon is anyway, right? And they wrote that way for a decade, and there are blogs and news articles and all this stuff. And the AI says everybody writes this way, so therefore I'm going to write this way, right? That's why it does that, and that's kind of a tell. So if you ever use AI, make sure go back and look for M dashes and make sure they're not a bunch of it. And I low level writing, I don't have a problem. If I have to write an email, a lot of times I'll write the email and I'll say, "Hey AI, make this look like I'm not a jerk," and it'll fix that and things like that. So, but also, how can I appeal to this kind of audience? Am I accomplishing my communication goals? Things like that, and it'll help me rewrite it. So, and that's true of my blogs as well. Um, yeah. Okay. Um, good. Barbara, thank you. So you can see the kind of answers it's giving. I really wanted you guys to see because everybody's a little bit apprehensive and stuff. And again, the old saying of garbage in, garbage out very much applies to AI. So if you make sure the input is good by building your own library, then what comes out of it is also should be good. And it opens up a way of using a library that is very hard to do in person. If you're doing research, for instance, I build a library of everything I want to use in the research, and then I use that to help me vet my rough drafts, and then help me find sources that jive with what I'm saying. Biggest problem with that is that it didn't actually save any time because what it did is it opened up a huge number of rabbit holes. I'm like, oh, this looks really interesting. I'm going to look at this for a while. Oh no, this only has to be 4,000. This can only be 4,000 words. Oh, I want to talk about this. And yeah, that's for me at least, that's a real problem. But it's good. It certainly made me think about things in a different way. Yes, great, Penny. Meaningful engagement through constructionism. Exactly. Yeah. So again, these sources are have a bias to them. I won't lie. I'm very much a active learning. Students need to construct their universe and stuff. And it's not sage on the stage. It's not having the conversations. And not me preaching to them. Doesn't work real well either as a teacher or as a parent. So you have to let your kids make their own mistakes. Um, yeah, task stewardship, make them part of own their process. Um, exactly. So yeah, this gives you kind of similar outputs as the one I built. And Maybe you want to go a little different flavor. Again, you can put in whatever, literature you like. Those are ones that I like, that I think make a lot of sense, that I've always tried to practice as much as possible, even if I didn't always completely understand how to turn theory into action. This helps me a lot with that. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't think we have 10 to 15 years, John. I think we're going to muddle our way through the next 10 to 15 years finding that place, but we're going to be redefining it every year. But I don't think we can't wait for that process to resolve itself. We have to build it ourselves. And so yeah, either we build it or institutions are going to build it for us. And I don't like the idea of that because one of the things that's a constant when it comes to technology and education is that institutional people who buy technology and then force us to use it, LMS, don't understand a damn thing about teaching. And those things are often get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish more than anything else. And and so you have to, I spend a lot of time working around Canvas. It doesn't do formative assessment well, for instance. And it's partially because the people who create this stuff and the people who buy it aren't teachers. And the teachers, the faculty don't understand it well enough in order to be able to say, well, this messes up what I'm trying to accomplish here. Again, something you can use AI for. I've used it to say, okay, these are the things I want to do. Where's Canvas going to get in my way? And if you use Gemini for that, it has access to all the online materials about Canvas, including all the community discussions and everything. And it'll tell you, this is where you're going to run into this problem. This is where you're going to run into this problem. I use it to debug Canvas all the time. It's not doing what I expect it to do. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. What's going on? And it'll say, yeah, well, you need to flip this switch on the third page in on this, kind of on your settings page and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, so, okay. So hopefully this was useful. Um, Came in just under an hour. Tried to avoid rabbit holes as much as possible, but I'm always willing to continue, happy to continue the conversation. Again, here's the bibliography at the bottom. Again, the first bibliography here is the stuff I'm using. Not all of this is OER stuff, but it's stuff that I own. And so again, I can share. The thing with copyright is that changing its mode, just like you could record a show with TV, with Betamax and stuff like that, is not the illegal part. It's sharing that is the quote unquote illegal part. Now, again, we need to think carefully about how copyright works because it does get in your way. And I would love to be able to share this database with you guys. And do I think it would mean that you wouldn't buy all these books? For the most part, I would say no. I think you're more likely to buy them and say, you know what? I really need to read this. Because then you start using it and you go, I use it to vet books. So I have a bunch of books. We all have this, um, a stack of books that I need to read this. Well, a lot of times if I want to knock that stack down, I'll say, what's in this book? What's in this book? And I'll have it do a quick run through. And it's amazing how many books, and this is true for, again, pre-AI, I have a ton of books where I have a bookmark on page 30 because I read the first 30 pages and I'm like, okay, I've seen what this guy's idea is. I'm not going to read another 200 pages. He's having repeated over and over and over again. Well, AI can tell me which of the books are like that or which of the books are ones that I really need to spend time. There are other books that, I read one chapter and I have to think about for 2 weeks. And AI helps me identify which is which. And that's a huge time saver for me too. So, because I'm always wanting to learn too. Thank you guys. So again, I'm my email address is well, I have multiples, but tom.hames at hccs.edu. But I also do most of my AI work is at tom at ideaspaces.net. I also blog there on AI. If anybody wants to peruse that and I talk about these things at ideaspaces.net. And I'm building an AI tool for knowledge mapping, which is different, all the different thing altogether. Okay, excellent. Thank you guys for those of you who were participated. Thank you, especially. Please, don't hesitate to go and look what other people found. Compare it to what you found. Um, you ask the question slightly differently, you're going to get a slightly different answer. So, thanks, guys. Have a good one.